You see that ranch out there? The big one with the White House sitting proud on the hill? Those oak trees standing guard like they've been there since the world began? That's the Broken Spur, best cattle operation in 3 counties, maybe in all of Texas, if you want my honest opinion. The man who owns it is Wade Sullivan. 71 years old now, still rises before dawn. The woman beside him on that porch, that's Josephine, his wife of 43 years. Together they built something that folks around here still talk about when they're looking for proof that good things can happen in hard country. But 20 years ago, that ranch was just a dream held together by one lonely man's stubborn hope. And then one summer day in 1875, I brought him the woman who would change everything. My name's Cal Brennan. I've been driving stagecoach across this territory for 42 years. Carried every kind of soul you can imagine. Gamblers running from debts they couldn't pay. Preachers chasing salvation they couldn't find. Women fleeing bad marriages and men fleeing worse consciences. I've seen humanity at its best and worst, packed into a wooden box on wheels, bouncing across country that doesn't forgive mistakes. But in all those years, in all those miles, I never carried anyone quite like Josephine Ali. She didn't know it when she climbed into my coach in Fort Worth that June morning. Didn't know she was about to become part of frontier legend. Didn't know that the worst disappointment of her life was leading her straight to the best thing she never knew she needed. All she knew was that she was heading to Redemption, Texas, to marry a man she'd never met. Let me tell you how that worked out. It was the kind of heat that makes you forget what cool feels like. The summer of 1875 came on hard and stayed that way. The kind of weather that bakes the sense out of men and turns good soil to dust. 3 weeks without rain, and the whole territory was holding its breath, waiting for the sky to break. I'd been driving the Fort Worth to Redemption route for 6 years by then. Knew every rut in the road, every place where the wheels liked to stick. Knew which creek beds would be dry and which might still have water worth stopping for. That particular trip I had 4 passengers, 2 traveling salesmen in the back, sweating through their city suits and complaining about the dust. An old-timer heading home from visiting family, sleeping through most of the journey with his hat pulled low. And her. Josephine Ali sat by the window, watching Texas roll by like she was memorizing it. She was 22 years old, though she carried herself like someone older. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Navy traveling dress that had been fine once, but showed the wear of 3 weeks on the road. She kept her small valise close, like it contained everything she owned in the world, which, as it turned out, it did. She didn't talk much during the journey, just watched the landscape change from the green of East Texas to the brown of the prairie. I'd catch her face in the mirror sometimes when I looked back, calm, composed. But there was something in her eyes that made me think she was either very brave or very desperate, maybe both. The salesman tried talking to her a few times. She was polite but firm, kept her answers short. Made it clear she wasn't interested in conversation. After a while, they gave up and went back to complaining about the heat. I liked her for that. It was late afternoon when we rolled into Redemption. The sun hung low and mean, turning everything gold and sharp-edged. The town looked smaller than usual in that light, more vulnerable. Just a collection of wooden buildings trying to convince themselves they were civilization. Main Street ran straight as a bullet, maybe 200 yards end to end. False front buildings on both sides, most of them leaning a little from the wind. The church steeple rose up in the middle, white paint peeling but still proud. You could see it from miles out, pointing at heaven like it was making a promise. Or maybe a threat. The stage wheels kicked up a cloud of dust as we came down the main street. People stopped to watch. They always did. The stage meant news, meant mail, meant someone was coming or going. In a town that size, that was entertainment. I pulled the horses to a stop outside the depot. The brake creaked. The wheels settled. Dust drifted past us like a curtain. "Redemption, Texas," I called out. "End of the line." The salesman climbed out first, grumbling and stretching. The old-timer followed, moving slow. Then Josephine. She stood for a moment on the step looking at the town. I watched her take it in, the dusty street, the weathered buildings, the curious faces of folks wondering who she was. And I saw something shift in her expression, just a flicker, quick as lightning, like maybe redemption wasn't what she'd been expecting. But she stepped down anyway. Her gloved hands gripped that small valise. Her boots touched Texas dirt. And she straightened her shoulders like she was preparing for battle. I was climbing down to help with luggage when I saw the thin man in the too-good suit heading our way. Frederick Toombs. I knew him slightly, Porter's business associate, though what business Porter actually had was a mystery to most of us. Toombs was the kind of man who smiled too much and meant it too little, the kind who'd sell you a horse and swear it was sound, then be gone before you discovered it was lame. I didn't like him. He was making a straight line for Josephine, and I felt something tighten in my gut, a warning. The kind you get when you've lived long enough to know trouble by its walk. "You must be Miss Ollie," Toombs called out, that oily smile already in place. Josephine turned to face him. "I am. Frederick Toombs, Mr. Porter's business associate." He glanced around like he was hoping for an escape route. "I'm afraid I have some rather unfortunate news." I saw her hands tighten on that valise, saw her chin come up just a fraction, but her voice stayed steady. "Where is Mr. Porter? I sent a telegram informing him of my arrival date." Toombs cleared his throat, shifted his weight, looked everywhere except at her face. "Yes, well, you see, Mr. Porter has since married another, a local widow with considerable property. The situation developed rather quickly, I'm afraid, after your correspondence was already well established." The words hung in the air like smoke. Around us, the street had gone quiet. People who'd been walking had stopped. Folks on porches leaned forward. In a town that size, news traveled at the speed of sound, and this was news worth hearing. A woman had come all the way from Boston to marry a man who'd already married someone else. That kind of scandal could feed conversations for months. "Married another," Josephine repeated. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but I heard it. Heard the way it shook just slightly on the second word, heard the weight of understanding settling over her like a blanket. "But I've traveled nearly 2,000 miles, she said. "I've spent my last dollars on this journey." "Most regrettable," Toombs offered. His sympathy was about as genuine as a $3 bill. "Mr. Porter sends his apologies and has authorized me to provide you with funds for a return journey." Return to what? The question came out quiet but hard. Like a stone dropping into still water, Toombs blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Return to what?" Josephine asked again, and this time there was steel underneath. "I have no family in Boston, no job, no home. What exactly would I be returning to, Mr. Toombs?" He had no answer for that, just stood there opening and closing his mouth like a fish. I was about to step in, couldn't watch this anymore without saying something, when a voice came from behind us. "Is everything all right here?" Deep voice, calm. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. We all turned. I knew Wade Sullivan by sight, of course. Hard not to in a town that size. He kept to himself mostly, came to town for supplies and business, didn't make trouble. Folks respected him. He'd built that ranch from nothing after his father died, worked harder than 3 men put together, and never asked anyone for help he didn't need. But I'd never really looked at him before, not the way I did in that moment. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of build you get from actual work rather than intention. Broad shoulders, weathered face that had seen more sun and wind than any man should have to. Brown hair that wanted to curl if he'd let it, but he kept it cut short. Wore dusty riding clothes and boots that had walked 1,000 miles. But it was his eyes that caught you. Blue. Clear, like looking at sky through clean water. And in that moment, those eyes were fixed on Josephine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "This is a private matter," Toombs said curtly, trying to dismiss him. Wade didn't even glance his way, just kept looking at Josephine. "Seems to me the lady might need assistance," Josephine drew herself up. I'm quite fine, thank you. She wasn't, of course, anyone could see that, but she had pride left, and she was clinging to it like a lifeline. Wade studied her face for a long moment. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled, just a slight curve at the corner of his mouth, but it changed his whole face, made him look younger, softer. No, ma'am, I don't believe you are fine, he said gently, but I respect you for saying so anyway. He turned to Toombs then, and the softness vanished. Let me make sure I understand the situation. Miss Ollie came here as a mail-order bride for Edwin Porter, and Porter's already taken himself a wife. The circumstances changed rather unexpectedly. Toombs started. I'm sure they did. Wade's voice could have cut glass. So now you're trying to arrange for Miss Allie's return journey. Send her back where she came from, like a package that couldn't be delivered. Well, when you put it like that, how else would I put it? Toombs had no answer. Around us I could feel the crowd growing, more people drifting closer, pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Wade removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair. Then he looked at Josephine again, and I swear I saw something shift in his expression, like a door opening, or maybe a decision being made. I'm Wade Sullivan, ma'am. I own the Broken Spur Ranch just outside of town. Josephine nodded slightly. Mr. Sullivan, if Porter's fool enough to make promises he won't keep, Wade said slowly, then I'd say that frees you up to consider other offers. The street got very quiet. I'm in need of a wife to help run my ranch, Wade continued. His voice was steady, matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. It's not a palace, but it's a good, honest living. I can offer you a home, security, and respectability. In exchange, I'd expect help managing the household and eventually the business side of the ranch. Toombs made a choking sound. This is highly irregular. So is leaving a woman stranded after promising her marriage, Wade cut in. Then back to Josephine. I'm not asking for an answer right now, Miss Allie. Just offering you another option to consider. Josephine stared at him. I watched her face, saw about a dozen different emotions cross it in the space of a heartbeat. Shock, disbelief, suspicion, and underneath it all, something that might have been hope, though she was fighting hard not to let it show. Mr. Sullivan, she began carefully, you don't even know me. I know you had the courage to travel across the country on the promise of a better life, he replied. That tells me something about your character, Miss Allie. The rest, I reckon we can figure out along the way. This is absurd, Toombs protested. Miss Allie is clearly a refined Eastern woman. She can't possibly— Why don't we let Miss Allie decide what she can and can't do, Wade suggested. The words were polite, but the tone underneath wasn't. Seems to me she's capable of speaking for herself. He was right about that. Josephine had been watching the exchange like a hawk, watching mice. Now she turned that sharp attention back to Wade. Why would you make such an offer to a complete stranger, she asked. It was the right question, the smart question, and I could see Wade respected her for asking it. Because I've been looking for someone with spirit enough to start fresh in tough land, he said. From the look in your eyes right now, ma'am, I'd say you've got that in spades. And if I decline, then I'll still pay for your room at the boarding house while you figure out your next move. Wade said it without hesitation. No strings attached. You're in a difficult spot through no fault of your own. Common decency says a man ought to help if he can. I watched Josephine absorb that, saw her reassessing him. This wasn't the desperate proposal of a man who couldn't get a wife any other way. This was something else, something more thoughtful. I'll accept your offer of lodging for tonight, Mr. Sullivan, she said finally. Her voice was firm, clear. As for the rest, I'll need time to consider. Wade nodded, seemed neither disappointed nor surprised. Fair enough. He gestured toward a modest building down the street. Mrs. Grayson runs a respectable establishment. I'll walk you over and make the arrangements. That won't be necessary? It's necessary, Wade said gently. You're new in town, and you've had a shock. Let me do this much at least. Josephine looked at him for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. As they started down the street, Toombs called after them, Mr. Porter still wishes to provide funds for Miss Ali's return journey. Keep Porter's money, Wade said without turning around. She won't be needing it. I should have started unloading luggage, should have tended to the horses, should have done my job. Instead, I stood there watching Wade Sullivan and Josephine Ali walk down that dusty street together, and I felt like I was watching something important, something that would matter. The salesmen were already gossiping with the depot clerk. The old-timer had wandered off. Around me, redemption was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. This story would be in every house by supper time, twisted and embroidered with each telling. But I'd seen the truth of it. I'd seen a woman get her heart broken in the space of 3 sentences, and I'd seen a man take one look at her and decide she was worth the risk. Mrs. Alice Grayson's boarding house sat on a corner lot, 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Flower boxes under the windows, though the flowers were looking tired in the heat. Rocking chairs on the porch, waiting for evening when it was cool enough to sit. It was one of the nicer buildings in town. Clean, well-maintained. The kind of place that said its owner took pride in doing things right. I finished with the stage and headed over, curious. Told myself I was just being friendly, checking on a passenger. But truth was, I wanted to see how this played out. The front door was open to catch any breeze that might wander through. I could hear voices inside. Wade's low rumble and a woman's warmer tones. Mrs. Grayson, then. I knocked on the door frame and stepped in. The interior was dim after the bright sun outside. Took my eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, I saw Wade and Mrs. Grayson standing by the stairs. Josephine sat in a chair by the window, looking small and tired. "Cal?" Wade greeted me. "Didn't expect to see you." "Just making sure Miss Ali got settled proper," I said. "Part of the service." Mrs. Grayson, 50-something, sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that could be stern or kind depending on what you needed, gave me a look that said she knew exactly why I was there. But she didn't call me on it. "I was just telling Mr. Sullivan that Miss Ali can have the blue room on the 2nd floor," she said. "It's quiet, has a nice view of the street." "That's generous of you, Mrs. Grayson," Josephine said softly. "Nonsense, you've had a terrible day, dear. Least I can do is offer you a decent bed and some peace." Wade was standing with his hat in his hands, turning it slowly. He looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. "Miss Ali," he finally managed, "I know this has all been unexpected. I don't want you to feel pressured about my offer. Take whatever time you need to think it over." Josephine met his eyes. "You've been very kind, Mr. Sullivan, more than I had any right to expect from a stranger." "Wade," he said. "Just Wade. We don't stand on ceremony much out here." "Then you should call me Josephine." Something passed between them in that moment. Just a flicker of connection, quick as lightning on a summer night. But I saw it. So did Mrs. Grayson, judging by the way her eyebrows lifted slightly. Wade put his hat back on. "I'll come by tomorrow at noon if you're willing to talk further. But if you'd rather I didn't, noon will be fine," Josephine said. He nodded. Looked like he might say something else, then thought better of it. Just gave a small tip of his hat to the ladies and headed for the door. As he passed me, he paused. "Cal, you staying in town tonight?" "Planning on it. Stage doesn't head back till day after tomorrow." "Good. I'll buy you a drink later. Want to ask you something?" He was gone before I could respond. Mrs. Grayson moved to the stairs. "Come on, dear. Let me show you to your room. I imagine you'd like to wash up and rest before supper." Josephine stood, picking up her valise. But she paused at the base of the stairs, looking back at me. "Mr. Brennan, may I ask you something?" "Cal," I said, "and yes, ma'am." "Do you know Mr. Sullivan? Wade, I mean. What kind of man is he?" It was a fair question, smart question. She'd just had one man prove untrustworthy. She'd be a fool not to be cautious about another. I thought about how to answer. Thought about Wade Sullivan working his ranch alone year after year. Thought about the way he'd looked at Josephine like she was something precious and unexpected. "I don't know him well," I said honestly, "but I know his reputation. He's a hard worker, fair to his hands, pays his debts. Folks respect him. He keeps to himself mostly, but that's not unusual for ranchers out here. And the offer he made me? Does that seem usual for him? No, ma'am. That was about the most surprising thing I've ever seen Wade Sullivan do. She absorbed that. Do you think he's sincere? I think, I said slowly, that Wade Sullivan doesn't say things he doesn't mean. Whatever his reasons for making that offer, they're genuine. Whether they're good reasons, I shrugged. That's for you to judge. Josephine nodded. Thank you for your honesty. One more thing, I added. You asked what kind of man he is. I can't tell you his whole character. But I can tell you this. He looked at you like you were worth the trouble. In my experience, a man who sees value in a woman who's down on her luck, that's a man worth considering. Mrs. Grayson made a small sound of approval. Well said, Cal. I found Wade later at the saloon, not the rowdy kind of saloon where trouble starts. The Redemption House was quieter, working men's place. You could get a drink and a meal without worrying about a fight breaking out every hour. Wade sat alone in the back corner, nursing a whiskey. He had that look men get when they're thinking too hard about something they can't quite figure out. I bought myself a beer and headed over. Mind if I sit? He gestured at the empty chair. Free country. I sat, drank, waited. Wade would talk when he was ready and not before. The saloon hummed with quiet conversation around us. Piano player in the corner picking out a slow tune. Smell of tobacco and spilled beer and working men at day's end. Lamplight making everything soft and amber. Finally, Wade spoke. I want to know about her. Josephine, you brought her from Fort Worth. 3 weeks on the road from Boston before that. What can you tell me? I considered my answer. She kept to herself mostly, polite but distant. Watched the country go by like she was memorizing it. Didn't complain once, even when the heat was brutal. Anyone give her trouble? A couple of salesmen tried talking to her. She shut that down quick but courteous. Made it clear she wasn't interested without being rude about it. Wade nodded, taking that in. She have much in the way of luggage? Just that one small valise. Everything she owns, I'd guess. He was quiet for a long moment, then, You think I'm crazy, making an offer like that to a stranger? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I think you did something impulsive. Whether it's crazy depends on why you did it. Wade looked at me then, really looked at me. You believe in fate, Cal? I believe in choices, I said. Fate might put two people in the same place at the same time, but what they do about it, that's choice. Fair enough. He drained his whiskey. I've been thinking about advertising for a wife for 3 years. Every time I almost sent the advertisement, something stopped me. Couldn't put my finger on what. Just didn't feel right. And today felt right? Today felt like I'd been waiting for her, like my instincts had been telling me to wait, and now I knew why. He said it matter of fact, like discussing the weather, but there was weight underneath. Certainty. You saw her for maybe 5 minutes, I pointed out. How can you be sure? Wade smiled slightly. My mother used to say, when you know, you know. Spent 3 years not knowing. Then Josephine Ali stepped off your stage, and I knew. Knew what? That she's real. No pretense, no games. She's been hurt and she's scared, but she's not broken. That's what I've been looking for. Someone real. He signaled the bartender for another round. When the drinks came, he raised his glass slightly. To choices, he said. To choices, I agreed. We drank. Outside, the Texas night was settling over Redemption like a blanket, stars coming out one by one, heat finally breaking. Somewhere a dog barked, somewhere a baby cried. Life happening in all its messy, ordinary glory. And upstairs in a boarding house room, a woman from Boston was trying to decide whether to trust a rancher she'd just met or climb back on my stage and run as far as her money would take her. I didn't know which choice she'd make. But I found myself hoping, maybe even praying a little, that she'd choose to stay. Because I'd seen the way Wade looked at her, and I'd seen the way she'd looked at him when she thought no one was watching. Like maybe, just maybe, This disaster might turn into something worth holding on to. Morning came hard and bright. I woke in my room above the saloon with the sun already heating the air. Could hear the town waking up around me, horses being led to water, shopkeepers sweeping porches, the everyday sounds of a place getting ready for another day of just being itself. I wondered if Josephine had slept, wondered what thoughts had kept her company through the long Texas night. I found out later, years later, over coffee at the Broken Spur when Josephine and I had become friends, what that first night was like for her. She told me she'd unpacked her few belongings in the blue room, hung up her 2 dresses, set out her brush and mirror, lined up the letters from Edwin Porter on the small desk by the window. Then she'd sat on the edge of the bed and let herself break. Not loud crying. Josephine wasn't the type for that, but quiet tears that came from somewhere deep, from the place where hope lives and dies, and sometimes, if you're lucky, finds a way to grow again. Her father had been dead 8 months. The factory where she'd worked had closed 6 months after that. The modest house she'd grown up in had been sold to pay his debts. Her sister Elizabeth had married against their father's wishes and moved to New York. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. Edwin Porter's advertisement had seemed like Providence, a respectable businessman seeking a well-educated wife to help him build a life in the growing frontier town of Redemption, Texas. His letters had been full of promises, a comfortable home, a position in society, security. She'd spent her last money on the journey west, and now she had nothing. Again. Except for one thing. A stranger with blue eyes and calloused hands had looked at her like she was worth saving. The question was, could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Or was she just trading one mistake for another? She told me she stayed up most of that night making a list. That's who Josephine was. When faced with chaos, she made lists. Organized the confusion into columns she could manage. On one side of the paper, reasons to accept Wade's offer. On the other, reasons to run. The lists came out about even, which meant she needed more information. I was having breakfast at the boarding house. Mrs. Grayson set a good table. When Josephine came down the stairs, she wore a simple brown dress, practical and neat, hair pulled back, face composed. But I could see the tiredness around her eyes, the slight tension in her shoulders. "Good morning, Miss Allie," Mrs. Grayson called from the kitchen. "Coffee's hot. Eggs and biscuits coming right up." "Thank you." Josephine sat at the table nodding politely to me and the 2 other boarders, an older gentleman reading a newspaper and a young traveling salesman who'd come in on yesterday's stage. The salesman tried making conversation. Josephine shut it down with such efficient politeness that I almost smiled. The young man went back to his eggs, deflated. Mrs. Grayson brought coffee and a full plate. "You look like you could use some proper food, dear. Can't make decisions on an empty stomach." "You're very kind." "Kind's got nothing to do with it, just practical." Mrs. Grayson poured herself a cup and sat down. "Now, what are you planning to do?" Straight to it. That was Mrs. Grayson's way. Josephine took a sip of coffee, considering her words. "I'm planning to gather information before making any decisions." "Smart. What kind of information?" "I'd like to know more about this town, about my options, about—" she hesitated. "About Mr. Sullivan?" Mrs. Grayson nodded approvingly. "Even smarter. What would you like to know?" And just like that, they were deep in conversation. Mrs. Grayson told her about Redemption, how it had started as a way station and grown into a proper town, how the drought years had been hard, but the community had survived, how most folks were decent, some were not, and you learned quick which was which. I finished my breakfast and excused myself, but I could still hear their voices as I headed out. Josephine was asking questions, taking control of her situation. That's when I knew she'd be all right, whatever she decided. A woman who could think clearly after having her world torn apart? That was someone who could survive the frontier. I had business at the general store that morning. Needed to arrange for supplies to be ready for my return trip. The store sat right in the middle of Main Street, impossible to miss. Porter's Mercantile, the sign said. though everyone knew it should say Porter and Wife's Mercantile now, given who really had the money. The bell over the door jangled as I entered. Edwin Porter stood behind the counter, looking like a man who'd spent the night regretting his choices. Thin face, receding hairline, nervous hands that couldn't stay still. He wore a vest that was trying too hard to look prosperous, and failing. "Morning, Cal," he said, voice pitched too friendly. "What can I do for you?" I gave him my list. Watched him total it up with shaking hands. "Heard there was some excitement at the stage depot yesterday," he said, not meeting my eyes. "That's one way to put it." "It was all a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "I never meant for Miss Ali to travel all this way. The letters, they were just... I was being polite. Miranda and we've known each other since childhood. Our marriage was always going to happen once her late husband's affairs were settled." "That why you kept writing to Josephine?" I asked mildly. "Politeness?" His face flushed. "It got away from me. I should have been clearer earlier. But Miranda's family has connections, property. It made sense to—" "Stop talking, Edwin." We both turned. Josephine stood in the doorway, morning light behind her. She'd been listening. Porter went pale. "Miss Ali, I didn't expect—" "Clearly." She stepped into the store, moving with careful dignity. "Mr. Porter, I came to purchase a few necessities. I'll take my business elsewhere if my presence makes you uncomfortable." "No, of course not." He was sweating now. "I'm very sorry about the confusion. Truly, if there's anything I can do to make amends, you can sell me what I need without further conversation." She handed him a short list. He scurried to gather the items: soap, writing paper, a few other small things. His hands trembled as he wrapped them. I stayed where I was, pretending to examine some harness leather, but I was watching. Josephine paid in coins, counted out exactly. Took her package. Then she looked at Porter straight on. "Mr. Porter, I want you to know something. I'm not angry with you. I'm disappointed in myself for believing your letters, but that's a mistake I'll only make once." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing. Your wife stopped by the boarding house this morning. She offered me a position in your household." Porter's eyes went wide. "She what?" "As a maid." I declined, of course, but you might want to have a conversation with her about what constitutes appropriate behavior. She left. The bell jangled behind her. Porter looked like he'd been hit with a board. I collected my order slip and followed Josephine out. She was standing on the porch, taking deep breaths, steadying herself. "That took courage," I said. She glanced at me. "That took anger. Anger's easier than tears. Still counts." We stood there together, watching the street. A wagon rolled past, kicking up dust. Somewhere a smith's hammer rang against metal. Normal town sounds, life going on regardless. "Cal," Josephine said slowly, "may I ask you something?" "Sure." "You've been driving this route for years. You must know things about people, about this town. Some things. What do you know about Wade Sullivan?" There it was, the real question. I thought about my conversation with Wade the night before, thought about the look in his eyes when he talked about fate and choices. "I know he built his ranch from almost nothing," I said. "His father started the place, died when Wade was young. His mother passed a few years back. He's been alone since then, except for ranch hands. No wife, no family. Sister married and moved to Denver. That's it for family." Josephine absorbed this. "Mrs. Grayson mentioned something this morning about Wade and Miranda Porter. She said they knew each other before." "That's true. She said Miranda refused him once." I nodded. "When they were younger, Miranda wanted refinement, society, things Wade couldn't offer. She married old Mr. Jenkins instead. He had money." "And when Jenkins died?" "From what I heard, Miranda approached Wade. He wasn't interested." Josephine turned to look at me fully. "Why not? She's beautiful, wealthy now, socially connected." "You'd have to ask Wade. But if I had to guess? Wade Sullivan's the kind of man who remembers who stood by him when things were hard. Miranda chose money over him once. Why would he trust her not to do it again? So he chose me instead." She said it quietly. Someone desperate enough to say yes. No, ma'am, I don't think that's it at all. Then what? I took my time answering. I think Wade Sullivan's been waiting for someone real, someone who sees him for what he actually is, not what she wishes he could be. And when you stepped off that stage yesterday, broken down, angry, scared, but still standing, I think he recognized something he'd been looking for. Josephine was quiet for a long moment. Or, she said finally, I'm a convenient solution to his problem. He needs a wife. I need security. It's transactional. Could be, I agreed. But transactions based on honesty work better than romances based on lies. You got letters full of pretty promises from Porter. You got a straight offer from Wade. Which one would you rather build on? She didn't answer, just looked out at the street, thinking. Then she squared her shoulders. I have other places to visit this morning. Thank you for your time, Cal. She walked off toward the church. I watched her go, and I thought, that's a woman on a mission. She was testing her options, all of them. Smart. Josephine told me later about the rest of that morning. She visited Reverend Johnson at the church, found him in his study, a small room filled with books and morning light. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and the worn look of someone who'd seen too much suffering and still believed in redemption anyway. Miss Allie, he'd greeted her. I heard about your arrival. I'm sorry for the difficult circumstances. Thank you, Reverend. I was hoping you might answer some questions for me. Of course, please, sit. She'd asked him about Wade, about his character, his history, his standing in the community. Reverend Johnson had been thoughtful in his answers. Wade Sullivan is one of the most honorable men I know, he'd said. He keeps his word, treats his workers fairly, contributes to the church. When there was a fire at the Henderson place 2 years ago, Wade was the first one there with supplies and labor to help rebuild. And his offer to me? Does that seem in character? The Reverend had smiled slightly. Wade's not an impulsive man. If he made you that offer, he had his reasons. Good ones, I'd wager. But marriage? To a stranger? Miss Allie, the frontier's built on people taking chances on each other. Half the marriages out here start with less acquaintance than you and Wade have. What matters isn't how you start. It's what you build together. She'd thanked him and left. But she wasn't done. Around mid-morning, I saw her heading toward the saloon. Not the main entrance. She was too smart for that. But there was a side entrance that led to the restaurant area. Some saloons doubled as eating establishments during the day. The Redemption House was one of them. I was curious, so I followed, casual-like, just happening to need lunch early. Inside, I found Josephine sitting at a table with Miss Daisy Thornton. Now that was interesting. Daisy ran the Redemption House. She was in her 40s, with red hair going to gray and a sharp business sense. She'd come west as a young woman, invested smart, bought the saloon when the previous owner drank himself to death, ran it clean and profitable. She also had a reputation for looking out for women who had nowhere else to go. I took a table nearby, close enough to hear if I wanted to, which I did. Can always use good help, Daisy was saying. Restaurant needs someone who can manage accounts, deal with suppliers. The pay's decent, room and board included. What would people say, Josephine asked, about me working in a saloon? They'd say you're practical, restaurants separate from the drinking side, respectable enough. You wouldn't be serving liquor or dealing with drunks. But there would be talk. There's always talk. Daisy leaned back. Question is, can you live with it? You're already the woman who came west for one man and got proposed to by another in the space of 5 minutes. Folks are talking anyway. Might as well give them something true to talk about. Josephine smiled slightly at that. You're very direct, Miss Thornton. Daisy, and yes, I am. Life's too short for dancing around the truth. What do you think of Wade Sullivan? Daisy's expression softened. Wade's good people. Lost his mother to fever 5 years back. Nearly broke him. She was a fine woman, educated, kept him civilized even out on that ranch. What do you mean, nearly broke him? He blamed himself. His mother caught fever nursing a sick ranch hand. Wade thought he should have stopped her, should have sent the hand to town instead. Carried that guilt for a long time. Josephine was quiet, absorbing this. He made her a promise, Daisy continued, on her deathbed. I know because the doctor who attended her told me. She made Wade swear he'd find a good woman and build a family. Said she didn't want the ranch dying lonely. And has he been looking? Not that anyone could tell. He works, comes to town for supplies, goes back to the ranch, keeps to himself. Until yesterday, when he took one look at you and decided to keep a promise he'd been putting off for 5 years. Josephine's hands were clasped tight on the table. You think that's why he offered? To fulfill a deathbed promise? I think that might be part of it. But I also think Wade saw something in you that reminded him what he's been missing. His mother was strong, Miss Allie, smart. Didn't take nonsense from anyone. From what I saw yesterday, you're cut from similar cloth. After a moment, Josephine stood. Thank you for your time, Daisy, and for the offer. I'll consider it. Door's always open. I caught up with Josephine on the street outside. Gathering intelligence? I asked. She didn't look surprised to see me. Is it that obvious? Only to someone paying attention. What did you learn? That Wade Sullivan made his dying mother a promise. That he's carried guilt for 5 years. That people in this town respect him. She paused. That I have options beyond accepting or running. Daisy offer you work? She did. Restaurant management. It's tempting. But, Josephine looked at me. But it doesn't solve anything, does it? I'd still be dependent on someone else's goodwill, still vulnerable. Wade's offer, if it's genuine, represents something different. Partnership, I said. Exactly. Not employment, not charity. Partnership. She frowned. If I can trust it. We'd reached the boarding house. Josephine stopped on the porch steps. Wade said he'd come at noon. I should prepare what I want to ask him. I checked my watch. That's 30 minutes from now. Yes. Nervous? Terrified, she admitted. Then she smiled slightly. But that's never stopped me before. She went inside. I sat on one of the porch rockers, watching the street, waiting. The morning heat was building. Noon in summer Texas was no joke. Everything slowed down, waiting for the worst of it to pass. At exactly noon, Wade Sullivan rode up on a chestnut horse. He'd cleaned up, fresh shirt, shaved, hat brushed. But he still looked nervous, I could tell, the way he dismounted a little too carefully, the way he checked his reflection in the boarding house window before going to the door. Mrs. Grayson answered his knock. They exchanged words I couldn't hear. Then Josephine appeared in the doorway. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then Wade gestured toward the street. I thought we might walk, if you're amenable. Easier to talk without the whole town listening in. Josephine glanced at me. I pretended great interest in my pipe. All right, she said. They headed down the street together, not touching, keeping a respectable distance. But I could see the awareness between them, the careful way they moved in each other's orbit. Mrs. Grayson came out and sat in the rocker next to mine. What do you think? She asked. I think we're watching something that'll matter, I said, one way or another. You're a romantic, Cal Brennan. I'm a realist who's seen enough of the world to know when something's worth rooting for. We sat there in the heat, two old-timers watching a story unfold. Wade and Josephine walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open country. The land stretched out forever under that big Texas sky. Heat shimmered off the prairie grass. I wasn't there for this part, but years later, both of them told me about it. Wade had been direct, like always. I want to be honest with you about why I made that offer yesterday, Paddy said. Josephine had nodded. I'd appreciate that. 5 years ago, my mother died. Before she passed, she made me promise something. He'd looked out at the land, not at her. She said, find a woman with strength in her spine and kindness in her heart. Don't wait for perfect, wait for real. Build a family, Wade. Don't let this ranch die lonely. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. He'd taken a breath. I've been thinking about that promise for 5 years. Even wrote advertisements for a mail-order bride 3 times. Never sent them. Something always stopped me. Until yesterday. What changed yesterday? Then he'd looked at her. Really looked at her. I was in my hotel room when your stage arrived. I happened to be at the window. I saw you step down, saw your face when Toombs delivered his news, and I saw something I'd been waiting to see. What? Someone real, no pretense, no performance, just pure, honest reaction. You were hurt and angry and scared, but you didn't break. Your chin came up, your shoulders straightened, and I thought, that's her. That's the woman my mother meant. Josephine had been quiet for a long moment. So you came downstairs and offered me marriage. I came downstairs intending to offer help. The marriage part surprised me as much as you. Wade had smiled slightly, but once I said it, it felt right, like something that had been waiting to be said. That's not rational. No, ma'am, it's not. But I've learned to trust my instincts about people, and my instincts are telling me you and I could build something good together. You don't know me, Josephine had protested. I could be terrible, selfish, mean-spirited. Could be, but I doubt it. The way you handled Porter this morning, with dignity instead of cruelty, that tells me what I need to know about your character. You heard about that? Small town, word travels. They'd walked in silence for a bit. Then Josephine had stopped, turning to face him fully. I need you to understand something, Wade. I came west because I had nothing left in Boston. My father died in debt. I lost my home, my job, my security. Edwin Porter's offer seemed like salvation. I was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I understand. Do you? Because I need to know that if I accept your offer, it's not just another desperate mistake. I need to know you're offering partnership, not rescue. I won't be saved, Wade. I'll be an equal or I'll be nothing. Wade had studied her face for a long moment. Then he'd smiled, a real smile that lit up his whole face. Josephine Ali, I'm not looking to rescue anyone. I'm looking for a partner strong enough to help me run a ranch and smart enough to make it better. From what I've seen so far, you're more than qualified. I know nothing about ranching. You'll learn. I know nothing about keeping proper accounts or managing a household efficiently. You'll teach me. That's what partnership means. Josephine had looked out at the distant ranch lands, at the endless sky, at the hard, beautiful country that could kill you or make you stronger. I need time, she'd said finally. I need to see your ranch, understand what I'd be walking into. And I need honesty, Wade, complete honesty, about what you expect, what you need, what this marriage would really mean. Fair enough. Can you ride? It's been years, but yes. Then come to the ranch tomorrow. See it for yourself. Meet my men. Look at the accounts if you want. Ask any questions you need answered. He'd paused. And if you decide it's not for you, I'll respect that. No hard feelings. The offer of lodging stands either way. Why are you being so patient with me? Wade had looked at her with those clear blue eyes. Because patience is how you build things that last. I'm not interested in quick. I'm interested in forever. That evening, I found myself back at the saloon with Wade. He looked different, lighter somehow, like he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying. How'd it go? I asked. She's coming to the ranch tomorrow. That's good. She wants complete honesty, wants to see everything before she decides. Smart woman. Wade nodded. That's what makes this terrifying. She's smart enough to see through any bullshit, strong enough to walk away if it's not right. He drained his whiskey. What if she decides I'm not worth the risk? Then you'll have tried, I said. Your mother would be proud of that. He looked at me sharply. How did you? Small town, remember? Word travels. I leaned back. For what it's worth, I think Josephine's already half decided. She wouldn't be doing all this investigating if she was planning to run. She'd just run. You think so? I know so. I've been watching people make decisions for 40 years. She's not running. She's negotiating. Wade smiled at that. Partnership from the start, then. That's my read. We drank in comfortable silence for a while. Then Wade said, quiet-like, I saw her from my hotel window, you know, before I went down to the street. Figured as much. The moment she stepped off your stage, Cal, something in my chest just settled. Like a compass finding north. I can't explain it better than that. Don't need to. Some things don't have explanations. They just are. Think she'll say yes? I thought about Josephine, about the way she'd gathered information all day, like a general planning a campaign, about the steel in her spine and the intelligence in her eyes. I think, I said slowly, that if you're honest with her tomorrow, if you show her exactly what you're offering and what you're asking, she'll make the right choice. Whatever that is. Wade nodded, set his empty glass down. Time to head back to the ranch. Got to make sure everything's ready for tomorrow. He stood, put his hat on, then paused. Cal, thank you for bringing her here, he trailed off, searching for words. For being in the right place at the right time, I offered. Yeah, that. After he left, I sat alone with my beer and my thoughts. I'd driven that Fort Worth to Redemption route hundreds of times, carried thousands of passengers. Most of them I forgot as soon as they stepped off the stage, but something told me I'd remember Josephine Ali and Wade Sullivan for the rest of my life. The next morning dawned clear and hot. I was having breakfast at the boarding house when Josephine came downstairs. She wore her riding outfit, practical brown skirt, white shirtwaist, sturdy boots, hair in a tight braid, ready for business. Morning, Miss Ali, Mrs. Grayson greeted. Wade's outside with horses. You ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. But I could see the nerves in the set of her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands as she drank her coffee. Josephine, Mrs. Grayson said gently, May I tell you something? Of course. I lost my husband in the war, 12 years ago now. We'd been married 3 years, not long, but long enough to know what love looks like. She paused. After he died, I thought that was it. I'd had my chance. But lately I've been thinking, maybe there's more than one chance. Maybe life gives us opportunities if we're brave enough to take them. Are you talking about me or yourself? Josephine asked softly, Mrs. Grayson smiled. Maybe both. Just don't let fear make your decision. Let sense make it. And sense says Wade Sullivan's a good bet. Josephine squeezed her hand. Thank you. Outside, Wade was waiting with 2 horses. He'd brought a gentle-looking bay mare for Josephine, helped her mount with careful hands, making sure she was secure before swinging up onto his own chestnut. It's about an hour's ride, he said. Trail's easy. We can go slow. They rode out of town together. I watched them from the boarding house porch until they disappeared into the shimmer of heat and distance. Think she'll come back? Mrs. Grayson asked. One way or another, yes, I said. Question is, will she come back to stay or to pack her bags? We'd find out soon enough. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that while Wade and Josephine were riding toward the broken spur, Miranda Porter was making her own plans. She'd seen them together, watched Josephine walk with her husband-to-be, seen the way Wade looked at the Boston woman, the way he'd never looked at Miranda, not even when they were young. And Miranda Blackwell Porter wasn't the type to accept that quietly. She had connections in Redemption, people who owed her favors, people she could influence. That morning, she started calling them in. By noon, rumors were spreading through town like wildfire. About the desperate Eastern woman who'd thrown herself at Wade Sullivan, about how she'd tried to seduce Edwin Porter first, about her questionable past in Boston. None of it was true, but truth and rumor don't always keep the same company. And by the time Wade and Josephine returned to town, the damage would be done. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the problem with knowing how a story ends. You want to skip to the important parts. Let me back up. Let me tell you about what happened at the Broken Spur that day, because that's where everything changed. That's where Josephine Ali made her choice, and that's where Wade Sullivan's carefully patient plan started to unravel. The ride to the Broken Spur took them through country that made Josephine catch her breath. I heard about it later from both of them. How the land opened up as they left Redemption behind. How the prairie grass rolled like waves under the wind. How the sky got bigger the farther they rode until it felt like the whole world was just earth and air and possibility. Wade kept the pace easy, checking on Josephine every few minutes, making sure she was comfortable, pointing out landmarks. That creek bed's dry now, he'd said, indicating a sandy gulch, But come spring, it runs strong. Good water for the cattle. How many head do you run? Josephine had asked. About 300 right now. Could support twice that if I had better water access. There's a property adjacent to mine, the old Jenkins place. Has a year-round spring. Been trying to negotiate for it. The same Jenkins who was Miranda's first husband? Wade had glanced at her. News travels fast. Mrs. Grayson mentioned it. She's been very forthcoming. Alice Grayson's good people. Knows everyone's business but doesn't use it cruel. He'd paused. Yes, same Jenkins. The property went to his nephew after he died. Man doesn't want to ranch it, but he's asking top dollar because he knows I need that water. Josephine had filed that information away, already thinking, already calculating. That's who she was. Give her a problem, and her mind started working on solutions. They'd ridden in comfortable silence for a while. Then Wade had pointed ahead. There, that ridge, the broken spurs just beyond. They crested the rise, and Josephine saw it for the first time. The ranch spread out in a valley, sheltered by low hills. The main house sat on a slight elevation, 2 stories of timber and stone painted white, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Not fancy, but solid. Built to last. Outbuildings clustered nearby. A large barn, its red paint weathered, but still bright. A bunkhouse. Corrals. A small garden plot with flowers blooming despite the heat. And beyond it all, rolling grassland dotted with cattle. Oak trees providing shade. The sense of space and air and freedom. It's beautiful, Josephine had said softly. Wade had looked pleased. It's home. They rode down to the ranch at an easy pace. As they approached, several men emerged from the barn, ranch hands, coming to see who was arriving. Wade dismounted first, then helped Josephine down. His hands on her waist were careful, brief, proper. But she'd felt the strength in them. The calluses earned from hard work. Miss Allie, this is Daniel Cooper, my foreman. Daniel was young, maybe 26, with sun-bleached hair and a skeptical expression. He tipped his hat politely, but his eyes were assessing. Ma'am. Mr. Cooper. And that's Miguel Torres and Tom Henderson. Good men, both of them. The other hands nodded greeting. Miguel was older, weathered, with kind eyes. Tom was barely out of his teens, eager and curious. Daniel, could you see to the horses? Wade asked. Miss Allie and I will be a while. Sure thing, boss. As Daniel led the horses away, Josephine caught him exchanging a look with Miguel, a look that said, Boss bringing a woman to the ranch. What's that about? She understood. These men's livelihoods depended on Wade making good decisions. They had a right to be wary of a stranger. She'd have to prove herself to them, too. Wade showed her the ranch with quiet pride. The barn first, solid and well-maintained. The hayloft, the tack room where leather gleamed from regular oiling. Everything organized, everything in its place. You run a tight operation, Josephine observed. Have to. Out here, sloppiness can cost you. A forgotten gate, a missed repair, things add up, can mean the difference between profit and loss. Then the main house. He showed her inside with the air of a man hoping for approval, but trying not to show it. The front door opened into a large main room, stone fireplace on one wall, simple furniture, sturdy and well-made, and books, shelves and shelves of them. Josephine moved to the shelves, running her fingers along the spines, literature, history, agricultural texts, even poetry. Your mother's? She asked. Mostly. She was a teacher before she married my father, believed education was the one thing no one could take from you. He smiled slightly. She taught me and my sister both, made sure we could read and write proper, do our sums, think for ourselves. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Josephine pulled out a volume of Emerson. You've read this? Several times. Mother's favorite. She used to say Emerson understood that civilization and wilderness weren't opposites, that you could have both if you were intentional about it. Josephine looked at Wade with new eyes. This wasn't just a rough rancher. This was an educated man who'd chosen this life deliberately. What else? She asked. He showed her the kitchen, large, with a good iron stove and a pump that brought water right inside. Showed her the dining room with its sturdy table that could seat 8. The study with its desk covered in ledgers and papers. "This is where the business side happens," Wade said. "Accounts, correspondence, planning. I keep track of everything, but my systems," he gestured at the somewhat chaotic desk, "not as organized as it could be." Josephine's fingers itched to sort those papers. To create order from chaos. Upstairs, 4 bedrooms. The master chamber was large, with furniture that had clearly belonged to a woman once. A dresser with a mirror, a wardrobe, a rocking chair by the window. "My mother's things," Wade explained. I couldn't bring myself to change anything after she died." Josephine understood. Grief was like that. Sometimes you preserved things exactly as they were because changing them felt like losing the person all over again. The other bedrooms were simpler. One clearly Wade's with just a bed and a chest. The others empty, waiting. "For children," Wade said quietly. "Someday. He trailed off. "If you find the right partner," Josephine finished. "Yeah." They stood in the hallway between the bedrooms, close but not touching. The air between them charged with possibilities neither was quite ready to name. "Let me show you the original cabin," Wade said, breaking the moment. "Where my father started all this." The cabin sat on the edge of the property, preserved like a shrine. 1 room, log walls, packed earth floor, simple hearth, a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs. It was primitive compared to the main house, but Josephine could feel the history in it. "My father built this in 1848, Wade said. "He was 19 years old, came west with nothing but determination and a land grant. Built this cabin, cleared the land, started with 6 head of cattle he bought on credit." "The Broken Spur," Josephine said. "Why that name?" Wade smiled. "First year here, my father was breaking a wild horse. The horse threw him, and his spur broke. He landed hard, thought he might have broken ribs too, lay there in the dirt thinking maybe he'd made a mistake coming west. Maybe he wasn't strong enough for this life. But he got back up. Kept the broken spur. Had it mounted over the door here. Said it was a reminder that breaking doesn't mean defeated, that sometimes you have to break before you can become what you're meant to be." Josephine looked at the mounted spur above the door. Tarnished metal split clean through. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was. Died when I was 16. Kicked by a horse, hit his head wrong, was gone before the doctor could get here." Wade's voice was steady, but she heard the old pain underneath. "Left me to care for my mother and sister, to keep this place running." That must have been terrifying. It was. I failed more times than I can count that first year, made mistakes that cost us, but I learned. And I had my mother to guide me. She was strong, Josephine, stronger than my father in some ways. She kept us going when I wanted to give up. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the cabin. "I made her a promise before she died, to build on what they started, to make the Broken Spur something that would last, to find someone to share it with and build a family here." He turned to Josephine. "That's what I'm offering you. Not rescue, not charity. A chance to be part of building something that matters." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "You barely know me, Wade. What if I'm not capable of that? What if I fail you? What if you don't?" he countered. "What if you're exactly the partner I need and I'm exactly what you need? What if taking this risk is the smartest thing either of us ever does?" Before she could answer, a shout came from the direction of the main ranch. Boss, we got trouble." Wade was moving immediately, Josephine following. They ran back toward the corrals where Daniel was waving frantically. "Fence broke on the south pasture. Cattle getting into Harmon's wheat field. He's threatening to shoot any that aren't cleared out in the next hour," Wade swore. "Miguel, Tom, get horses. We need to move those cattle now before Harmon makes good on his threat." "I'm coming too," Josephine said. Wade looked at her. "It's going to be rough work. Hot, dusty, maybe dangerous. I can ride. I can help." She met his eyes. "Let me help." After a moment he nodded. "Daniel, get her a horse." The next 2 hours were chaos. 2 hours. Josephine had ridden as a girl in Boston, sedate canters through parks. This was nothing like that. This was hard riding across rough country, chasing panicked cattle, trying to turn them back before they destroyed a neighbor's crop. The heat was brutal. Dust coated everything. Her throat burned from yelling. Her thighs ached from gripping the horse. But she didn't quit. She watched Wade and his men work, saw how they moved together, anticipated each other, worked as a team. And she tried to do the same. "On your left," Wade shouted at one point, and Josephine turned her horse just in time to cut off a steer trying to bolt. "Good," Wade called. "Push him back toward the others." By the time they got the last of the cattle back through the broken fence and into the correct pasture, the sun was past its peak and everyone was exhausted. Wade dismounted to examine the fence. The wood was old, rotted through in places. "Need to replace this whole section," he muttered. "Should have done it last month, but I kept putting it off. Now it's cost us half a day's work and nearly cost us cattle." "And a neighbor's goodwill," Josephine added, looking across at Harmon's wheat field where several men stood watching them suspiciously. Wade nodded grimly. "I'll need to go apologize. Offer to pay for any damage." He looked at Daniel. "Get Tom started on removing the old fence posts. He stopped, swayed slightly. "Boss?" Daniel said sharply. Wade put a hand to his head. "I'm fine. Just heat, maybe?" Then he collapsed. Everything happened fast after that. Miguel caught Wade before he hit the ground completely. Tom ran for water. Daniel was shouting for someone to ride for the doctor. And Josephine was kneeling beside Wade, checking his pulse, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her. "He's burning up," she said. "This isn't just heat exhaustion. Help me get him to the house." Between the three men, they got Wade onto a horse. Miguel rode behind, holding him in the saddle. Josephine led the way, pushing her tired horse into a gallop. At the house, they carried Wade upstairs to his bedroom. Josephine started barking orders. "Tom, ride for Dr. Peterson. Fast as you can. Miguel, I need cold water, clean cloths, and any willow bark tea if there is any. Daniel, help me get his boots off." The men scrambled to obey. Something in her voice, calm, clear, commanding, made them trust her. While they worked, Josephine examined Wade. Fever. Definitely fever. But from what? Then she saw it. His left arm, when she pushed up the sleeve. An angry red wound, half-healed, infection setting in. "When did this happen?" she demanded. Daniel looked. "Day before yesterday. Got cut on some rusty wire. He said it was nothing, wrapped it himself. It's infected badly." Josephine's mind raced. She'd helped care for her father in his final illness, knew the signs, knew how quickly infection could turn deadly in this heat. Miguel returned with water and cloths. Josephine began bathing Wade's face, his neck, trying to bring the fever down. "There's no willow bark," Miguel said apologetically. "Then we do what we can." She looked at Daniel. "How long until the doctor gets here?" "Hour, maybe more." An hour in which the fever could spike higher, in which Wade could slip further away. Josephine made a decision. "I need you all to leave. Now, go tend the horses, fix that fence, whatever needs doing. I'll call if his condition changes." "Ma'am, it's not proper for you to be alone with," Daniel started. "Propriety can wait," Josephine cut him off. "Your boss needs care, and I'm the only one here who knows how to give it. So unless one of you has nursing experience, get out." They got out. Josephine worked through the afternoon and into the evening. She cleaned the infected wound as best she could with hot water and clean cloth, made Wade drink when he was conscious enough to swallow, bathed him with cool water when the fever spiked. And when he was delirious, when he muttered and thrashed, she held his hand and talked to him. Talked about Boston, about her father, about anything to keep him grounded. "Stay with me, Wade Sullivan," she whispered. "You made me a promise. Offered me a partnership. I'm holding you to that. So you stay with me. You hear?" At some point, Mrs. Hernandez arrived. Miguel had sent for her. The housekeeper took one look at the situation and nodded approval at Josephine's care. "You're doing good," she said in accented English. "I'll make broth. He'll need strength when the fever breaks." "If it breaks." Josephine said quietly. When? Mrs. Hernandez corrected firmly. Wade Sullivan is strong, and now he has reason to fight. She looked at Josephine meaningfully. Someone to fight for. The doctor arrived as sunset was painting the sky orange and gold. Dr. Peterson was an older man, efficient and thorough. He examined Wade, cleaned the wound more thoroughly, applied a poultice. You did well, he told Josephine. The fever would have been much worse if you hadn't started treatment when you did. He's lucky you were here. Will he be all right? Next 24 hours will tell. Fever should break by morning if it's going to. Keep doing what you're doing. Fluids, cool baths, watch for delirium. He paused. You planning to stay the night? Yes. Alone? Mrs. Hernandez will be here, for propriety's sake. The doctor smiled slightly. Good. Wouldn't want the town talking more than they already are. Josephine's head snapped up. What do you mean? Dr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. You haven't heard? There's been talk in town today. Rumors about you and Wade. Some nonsense about you trying to trap him into marriage, about your past in Boston being questionable. Josephine felt cold despite the evening heat. Who's spreading these rumors? Can't say for certain, but Miranda Porter was in town today visiting various ladies, and you know how these things start. After the doctor left, Josephine sat by Wade's bedside as darkness fell. Miranda. Of course it was Miranda. She should have expected this. Should have known the other woman wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. But it still hurt. To have her character questioned. To have lies spread about her when she'd done nothing wrong. Wade stirred, mumbling something. Josephine leaned closer. What is it? Don't leave. His voice was thick with fever, but the words were clear. Please, don't leave. I'm not leaving, she whispered, gripping his hand. I'm right here, Wade. I'm staying. And as she said it, she realized it was true. Whatever was happening in town, whatever rumors Miranda was spreading, didn't matter. What mattered was this man who'd looked at her and seen someone worth believing in. This man who'd offered her partnership when the world offered her nothing. She'd made her choice. Now she just needed him to survive long enough for her to tell him. I learned all this the next morning when I rode out to the Broken Spur. Word had reached town that Wade was sick, that Josephine had stayed. The rumors that were already flying turned into a full storm. I'd heard the talk at breakfast, heard the speculation, the judgment, and I'd decided enough was enough. Someone needed to know the truth, and someone needed to make sure Josephine wasn't facing this alone. I found her on the front porch, looking exhausted, still wearing yesterday's riding outfit, now dusty and wrinkled, hair coming loose from its braid. But her eyes were clear and determined. Cal? She greeted me. What brings you out here? Checking on you. And Wade. How is he? Fever broke an hour ago. He's sleeping now. Doctor says he should recover fully. Relief washed through me. That's good news. Yes. She sat in one of the porch rockers, moving like her whole body ached. It was a close thing, though. If we hadn't gotten him inside when we did. But you did. You took care of him. I did what anyone would have done. No, I said firmly. You did what a partner does, what family does. She looked at me with something like gratitude. Have you heard the talk in town? I asked carefully. Dr. Peterson mentioned it. Rumors. About me trapping Wade. About my supposed questionable past. She smiled bitterly. Miranda's work, I assume. That'd be my guess, too. She's been making the rounds, planting seeds. You know how it is in small towns. Lies travel faster than truth. I know. Josephine was quiet for a moment. Cal, can I ask you something? Anything. The money Wade gave me that first night. The envelope he left at the boarding house. Do you know where that money came from? I hesitated. It wasn't my story to tell, but Josephine needed to know. Daniel mentioned something yesterday, I said slowly. Said Wade had just paid the ranch hands their wages the day before you arrived. Said the boss was running thin until the cattle contracts came through next week. Josephine's face went still. He gave me his last cash. Near enough. And if I'd left town, if I'd used that money to go to Kansas City like I was planning, He'd have had to borrow from the bank, put the ranch at risk. She put her face in her hands. God, he risked everything for a stranger. He risked everything for you, I corrected. There's a difference. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. I can't let Miranda destroy him with lies. He doesn't deserve that. What are you going to do? I'm going to go back to town. Face her. Face all of them. Make them understand the truth. Josephine, that might not be wise. Tempers are running high. People believe what they want to believe. I don't care. She stood, squaring her shoulders. Wade put his reputation on the line for me, offered me partnership, gave me hope when I had none. I'm not going to hide out here while people slander him because of me. I recognized that look, that set to her jaw. She'd made up her mind. All right then, I said, but you're not going alone. Give me a few minutes to saddle a horse. Cal, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Wade would want someone looking out for you. And seeing as he's not in any shape to do it himself, the job falls to me. She smiled then, a real smile, warm and grateful. Thank you. We rode back to Redemption in the late morning heat. Daniel had tried to convince Josephine to wait, to rest, to let this blow over, but she'd been adamant. Mrs. Hernandez would stay with Wade. The fever had broken. He was in good hands, and Josephine had business in town. As we approached Redemption's main street, I could feel the tension. People stopped to stare. Conversation ceased. Windows filled with curious faces. Word had spread that Josephine was coming back to town. Where to first? I asked. The boarding house. I need to change clothes, make myself presentable. Then... She took a breath. Then I'm going to pay a call on Mrs. Porter. That's a bold move. It's the right move. This ends now, Cal. One way or another. We rode down Main Street with every eye on us. I heard the whispers, saw the pointing, felt the judgment rolling off the townspeople like heat off stones. But Josephine sat straight in her saddle, chin up, looking neither left nor right, dignified in the face of scandal. That's when I knew, without any doubt, that Wade Sullivan had chosen well. This woman had steel in her spine, and she was about to prove it to everyone in Redemption. We reached the boarding house. Mrs. Grayson was waiting on the porch, worry written all over her face. Josephine, thank God. I heard about Wade, about you staying at the ranch, about the rumors. She hurried down the steps. Come inside. We need to talk. I know about the rumors, Josephine said, dismounting. I'm here to put a stop to them. How? Josephine smiled, a smile that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with determination. By making Miranda Porter admit the truth, in front of the whole town if necessary. Mrs. Grayson's eyes went wide. You can't mean to confront her publicly. That's exactly what I mean to do. Josephine headed for the door, then paused. Mrs. Grayson, I need your help. I need you to gather as many of the town's women as you can. Tell them to meet at the church this afternoon. Tell them Josephine Ali has something to say about her intentions regarding Wade Sullivan. They'll come just for the scandal of it, Mrs. Grayson warned. I'm counting on it. Let them come for scandal. They'll stay for truth. 2 hours later, I stood at the back of Redemption's church and watched it fill with women. They came in twos and threes, dressed in their afternoon best, eyes bright with curiosity and judgment. The church hummed with whispered speculation. At the front, Josephine stood beside Reverend Johnson. She'd changed into her best dress, the navy one she'd worn when she first arrived, hair neatly done, composed and calm. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped each other. Mrs. Grayson sat in the front pew, a silent show of support. And there, 3 rows back, sat Miranda Porter. Beautiful in an expensive green dress, a small smile playing at her lips. She thought she'd won. She was about to learn otherwise. Reverend Johnson raised his hands for quiet. The whispers died down. Ladies, thank you for coming. Miss Ali has asked for this meeting to address some concerns that have arisen in our community. I've agreed to let her speak in hopes that we can resolve this matter with Christian charity and understanding. He stepped aside. Josephine moved to the center of the aisle, looking out at the assembled women. Thank you all for coming, she began. Her voice was steady, clear. "I know there has been talk about me, about my arrival in redemption, my relationship with Mr. Sullivan, and my character. I'm here to address that talk directly." Miranda's smile widened slightly. "Some of you have heard that I came to redemption to trap a wealthy man into marriage, that I seduced Mr. Porter, and when that failed, moved on to Mr. Sullivan, that my past in Boston was questionable." Murmurs rippled through the church. "Let me be absolutely clear," Josephine continued. "These are lies, every single one." "That's a strong accusation, Miss Allie," Miranda said smoothly from her pew. "Perhaps you can prove they're lies?" Josephine turned to face her directly. "I can, Mrs. Porter, and I will. Starting with you." The church went silent. "You and I both know exactly why I came to redemption. I came to marry Edwin Porter, who advertised for a mail-order bride and corresponded with me for 3 months. I came in good faith, only to discover he'd married you instead." "Edwin's correspondence with you was merely polite," Miranda began. "I have his letters," Josephine cut her off. 3 months of letters, specific proposals of marriage, promises of a home, a life together. I can produce them if necessary." Miranda's smile faltered slightly. "As for Mr. Sullivan," Josephine continued, addressing the whole room now, "he offered me marriage the day I arrived because he saw I was in a desperate situation. He offered me a choice when I had none. He has been nothing but honorable in his dealings with me." "How convenient," Miranda said sweetly, "that a wealthy rancher just happened to offer marriage to a penniless stranger." "Wade Sullivan isn't wealthy," Josephine replied. "He works hard for everything he has. And yes, he needs a wife to help run his ranch. He's been honest about that from the beginning. What he's offering is partnership, not rescue." "And you accepted this partnership?" one of the other women asked. "I haven't yet," Josephine said, "because I wanted to be certain. I wanted to see his ranch, understand what I'd be committing to, make sure we were compatible. That's why I visited the Broken Spur yesterday." "And stayed the night," Miranda added, her tone dripping with implication. "I stayed because Mr. Sullivan collapsed from an infected wound and high fever. I stayed because he needed medical care, and I was the only one present with nursing experience. Mrs. Hernandez was there as chaperone. Dr. Peterson can confirm the medical necessity." She turned back to Miranda. "But you know all this already, don't you, Mrs. Porter? Because you knew about Wade's injury. You knew he was vulnerable. And you chose this moment to spread lies about me, to damage both our reputations. The question is, why?" Miranda stood, her face flushed with anger now. "How dare you?" "Why, Miranda?" Josephine pressed. "Why do you care so much about whom Wade Sullivan marries?" "I don't—" "Is it because you refused him once?" Josephine asked. "When you were younger? Because he wasn't refined enough for you, so you married Mr. Jenkins for his money instead?" Gasps rippled through the church. This was news to most of them. Miranda's composure cracked. "That has nothing to do with—" "Or is it because when Mr. Jenkins died and you approached Wade again, he refused you, because he'd rather marry a penniless stranger than take back the woman who rejected him?" The church erupted in whispers. Miranda's face went from flushed to pale. "You have no right." "I have every right to defend my character and Wade's," Josephine said firmly. "You've been spreading lies about me to cover your own jealousy. You wanted Wade back, and he said no. So you married Edwin Porter, a good man who deserved better than being someone's consolation prize. And now you're trying to destroy what Wade and I might build together because you can't stand that he chose someone real over someone beautiful." "You know nothing about me," Miranda hissed. "I know enough. I know you've been miserable in your marriage. I know you regret your choices. And I'm sorry for that, truly. But your unhappiness doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's chances at happiness." Josephine turned to address the whole congregation. "I came here with nothing. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I'm not a gold digger or a seductress or any of the other things Mrs. Porter has implied. I'm a woman trying to build a new life in a hard land. And Wade Sullivan offered me a chance to do that with dignity and partnership." She paused, gathering herself for what came next. I haven't given Wade my answer yet, but I'm going to, and I want you all to hear it first, so there can be no question about my intentions." The church held its breath. "When Wade Sullivan is well enough to hear me," Josephine said clearly, "I'm going to tell him yes. I'm going to accept his proposal, and I'm going to work harder than I've ever worked to be worthy of the trust he's placed in me." She looked directly at Miranda. "And if anyone in this town has a problem with that, they can take it up with me, directly, like adults, not through whispers and lies." With that, she turned and walked down the aisle toward the door. The women parted before her like water. As she passed Mrs. Grayson, the older woman stood and fell into step beside her. Then another woman stood, and another, until a small group of women, maybe 6 or 7, were walking with Josephine out of the church. A statement of support in the face of scandal. I followed them out into the bright afternoon sun. Behind us, the church buzzed with voices, arguing, discussing, taking sides. But Josephine didn't look back. She stood on the church steps, shoulders back, chin up. She'd made her stand. Now she just had to face the man she'd promised herself to, and hope that when Wade Sullivan woke up fully, he'd still want her after the storm she'd just created. Wade Sullivan woke up fully the next morning with sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and no clear memory of the past 2 days. What he did remember came in fragments. Fever dreams, cool hands on his forehead. A voice, Josephine's voice, telling him to stay, to fight, to hold on. And he remembered, with absolute clarity, holding that voice like a lifeline. Mrs. Hernandez was there when he opened his eyes. She smiled, relief washing over her weathered face. "Welcome back, Mr. Wade. You gave us quite a scare." "How long?" His voice was rough from disuse. 2 days. The fever broke yesterday morning." She poured him water from the pitcher by the bed. "Miss Josephine, she took good care of you, sat with you through the worst of it." Wade's hand went to his left arm, found it bandaged clean and professional. The infection that had nearly killed him was already healing. "Where is she?" "Boarding house in town. She left yesterday afternoon." Mrs. Hernandez's expression turned serious. "There was trouble, Mr. Wade. Talk in town." She went to face it. Wade tried to sit up. The room spun slightly, but he pushed through it. "What kind of trouble?" Mrs. Hernandez told him. About Miranda's rumors. About Josephine staying at the ranch overnight. About the scandal that had spread through Redemption like wildfire. And about what Josephine had done. How she'd confronted Miranda in the church. How she'd defended both their reputations. How she'd stood in front of the whole town and announced she was going to say yes to his proposal. Wade listened in silence, his chest tight with something that might have been fear or pride or both. She did that? In front of everyone? Daniel rode to town yesterday to get supplies. He heard it from 3 different people. Mrs. Hernandez smiled. "Your lady has spirit, Mr. Wade, just like your mama said to look for." Wade ran a hand over his face. His mother. God, his mother would have loved Josephine, would have recognized in her the same strength she'd possessed. "I need to go to town," he said. "You need to rest. Now, Rosa, I need to go now." He could see her weighing it. Medical sense against the look in his eyes. Medical sense lost. "I'll have Daniel saddle your horse, but you eat first. And if you fall off that horse from weakness, I will never let you forget it." I was sitting on Mrs. Grayson's porch when Wade rode into town. He looked like hell, pale under his tan, moving carefully like everything hurt, but his eyes were clear and determined. He dismounted slowly, tied his horse, then turned to find me watching. "Cal, where is she?" "Inside. Been in her room since yesterday. Mrs. Grayson's been taking her meals up." I stood. "You look like you should still be in bed." "Probably, but I need to see her." "She thinks she ruined you," I said quietly. "Thinks the scandal will hurt your business, your standing in town. She's been punishing herself with it since the church meeting." Wade's jaw tightened. "That's not her burden to carry. Try telling her that." He moved toward the door. I caught his arm. "Wade, What she did yesterday, standing up in that church, confronting Miranda, claiming you in front of the whole town, that took more courage than most people have. Don't waste it." He looked at me steadily. "I won't, Mrs. Grayson met him at the door, took one look at him, and shook her head. "You should be resting." "So I've been told. Can I see her?" "She's in the blue room, second door on the left." Mrs. Grayson paused. "Wade, she's been hurting. Be gentle. Always." He climbed the stairs slowly, each step an effort, stopped outside the blue room door, took a breath, knocked. "Come in." Josephine was sitting by the window, still in her dress from yesterday. She turned as the door opened, and her face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Shock, relief, joy, then guilt. "Wade, you shouldn't be out of bed, so everyone keeps telling me." He came into the room, closing the door behind him. Propriety be damned. They needed to talk. "I heard what happened, what you did." She stood, wringing her hands. "I'm so sorry. I know I should have stayed quiet, let it blow over, but I couldn't. I couldn't let them slander you because of me. So I went to the church and I confronted Miranda and She trailed off. "I made everything worse, didn't I?" "Worse?" Wade moved closer. "Josephine, you stood up in front of this whole judgmental town and claimed me. You defended my honor when I couldn't defend it myself. You chose me. How in God's name is that worse?" The scandal will pass. Scandals always do, but what you did," he reached out, took her hands in his, "what you did showed me exactly who you are. And I was right about you from the start." Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "I haven't even properly said yes yet. I announced it to the whole town before I told you. That was wrong of me. I should have waited." "Josephine," Wade smiled, "will you marry me?" She laughed, a sound caught between tears and joy. "I already told the whole town I would." "I'm not asking the town, I'm asking you." She looked up at him, at this man who'd seen her at her lowest and offered her partnership, who'd given her his last money and risked his health and let her take charge when he was vulnerable, who'd waited to ask this question until she was ready to answer it. "Yes," she said clearly. "Yes, I'll marry you, Wade Sullivan." He pulled her into his arms then, and she went willingly. They held each other in the quiet of the blue room while the afternoon sun painted everything gold. "I was so scared," Josephine whispered against his chest, "when you collapsed. When the fever wouldn't break, I thought I'd waited too long to say yes, that I'd lose you before I ever really had you." "You have me," Wade said. "From the moment you stepped off Cal's stage, you had me." "The hotel window," she said, pulling back to look at him. "Mrs. Grayson told me that you saw me before you came down to the street." Wade had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I did, and I know how that sounds." "It sounds like fate," Josephine interrupted. "Or choice. Or maybe both." She touched his face gently. "I don't care which. I'm just grateful you looked." They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Wade swayed slightly, and Josephine guided him firmly to the chair. "Sit before you fall down. You're still recovering." "Yes, ma'am." He sank into the chair gratefully. "Bossy already. I like it." "You're going to get a lot more of it once we're married." She knelt beside the chair. "Wade, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we start, I'm not going to be some demure rancher's wife who just keeps house. I'm going to want to be involved in every aspect." "Good," he interrupted. "I'm counting on it. I saw what you did with those cattle yesterday before I got sick. How you didn't quit even when it was hard. That's who I need beside me." "Partnership," Josephine said softly. "Partnership," Wade agreed. "Equal. Always. Then we should do this properly. When you're well. A real wedding. A real start." Wade nodded. 1 week from today. That gives me time to recover and gives Reverend Johnson time to do it right." He paused. "And it gives the town time to accept this. I won't have you married under a cloud of scandal." "The scandal was my own making. The scandal was Miranda's making. You just refused to let it stand." He squeezed her hand. "Let me handle Miranda. That's been coming for a long time." Wade paid his call on the Porters that afternoon. "I heard about it later from multiple sources. Seems half the town was watching through windows when Wade Sullivan walked into Porter's Mercantile. Edwin Porter went pale. Miranda, who'd been in the back room, came out with her chin high, ready for a fight. Wade didn't give her one. "Miranda," he said quietly, "we need to talk, just us. Edwin, give us a minute." Edwin scurried out like his pants were on fire. Wade and Miranda stood in the store, facing each other across years of history. "I'm not here to yell at you," Wade said, "or to threaten you. I'm here to ask you to stop." "Stop what?" Miranda's voice was cold. "Stop hurting yourself. Because that's what you're doing. You're not hurting Josephine or me. You're hurting you." Miranda's mask cracked slightly. "You don't know anything about what hurts me. I know you regret your choices. I know you wish things had gone different between us. But Miranda, that was 10 years ago. We were different people. And even if I hadn't met Josephine, we still wouldn't be right for each other. Because I'm not good enough. Because we want different things," Wade interrupted gently. "You want society and refinement and things I can't give you. I want partnership and honest work and a simple life. Neither of those is wrong. They're just different." Miranda was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small. "I made a mistake refusing you. I know that now. Maybe. Or maybe you made the right choice for who you were then. Either way, it's done. And holding on to it is just making you bitter. So you're choosing her. The desperate Boston woman who trapped you. She didn't trap me. I chose her. The same way you chose Edwin. The difference is I'm choosing someone who sees me for what I am and wants me anyway. Can you say the same?" Miranda flinched. Wade's voice softened. "Let it go, Miranda. Let me go. Find a way to be happy with what you have instead of angry about what you don't. You'll be better for it. Edwin will be better for it." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do." He left her standing there among the dry goods and regrets. The wedding was a week later, on a Sunday morning, when the heat had broken slightly and the sky was that impossible blue that only Texas can manage. Small ceremony. Just the Reverend, Mrs. Grayson, the ranch hands, a few townspeople who'd taken Josephine's side. And me, of course. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Josephine wore her mother's pale blue dress, altered to fit. Wade wore his Sunday best, still a little pale from his illness, but steady. They said their vows in front of God and witnesses, their voices clear and sure. When Reverend Johnson pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed her, brief and respectful, but with a promise of more to come. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said softly. "Mr. Sullivan," she replied with a smile. After the ceremony, there was a small gathering at Mrs. Grayson's. Simple food, quiet celebration. No one mentioned the scandal. No one brought up Miranda. This was a new start, clean and honest. I found Josephine alone on the porch for a moment, looking out at the town that was now her home. "Any regrets?" I asked. She smiled. "About 30 seconds worth when I was standing in that church facing down Miranda. But no regrets." "Good." I handed her a small package. "Wedding gift. From me." She opened it to find a journal, leather-bound and new. "For recording your new life," I said. "Your father was a clerk, you said. Kept good records. Maybe you'd like to keep your own. For your children someday." Her eyes misted. "Thank you, Cal, for everything. For bringing me here. For being there when I needed a friend." "That's what friends do." I looked out at the street. You know, in 40 years of driving stage, I've seen a lot of stories. But yours is one I'll remember. It's not over yet. No, the best parts are just starting. Wade and Josephine left for the Broken Spur that afternoon as husband and wife. I watched them ride out of town together, and I thought about beginnings, about how the worst disappointments can lead to the best discoveries, about how sometimes being broken is just the first step to becoming stronger, about how two strangers can choose each other and build something that matters. I stayed in Redemption for one more day before heading back to Fort Worth. Had to see how things settled. By the time I left, the town had mostly moved on. New scandals were already brewing. That's how it works in small places. Miranda and Edwin left town a month later, moved to Dallas, where nobody knew their history. I heard years later that they'd made some kind of peace with each other. Not love, maybe, but an understanding. The Broken Spur thrived. Wade and Josephine worked it together, just like they'd promised. She was brilliant with the accounts, he was brilliant with the land, and together they built something bigger than either could have managed alone. They bought the Jenkins property the next spring. Josephine negotiated the price down by finding a third party willing to pay for water access, which gave them leverage. Smart woman. Their first child, William Joseph, was born in the spring of '76. 3 more followed over the years. The ranch grew. Their reputation grew. They became the kind of couple people pointed to when they wanted proof that good partnerships could last. I stopped through Redemption on my regular routes, watched their family grow, watched their hair turn gray, watched them become the kind of old married couple that finishes each other's sentences and can communicate with just a look. And every time I visited, usually Josephine or Wade, sometimes both, would sit with me and we'd talk about that summer of 1875. About the day she stepped off my stage and the day he said those words that started it all. Then she's free to choose me. Now, here we are coming up on the Broken Spur in this summer of 1895. 20 years since that day. I slow the horses as we approach the ranch. My passengers lean out the windows, looking at the spread. It's impressive. White House gleaming on the hill, barns and outbuildings all in good repair, cattle dotting the fields, oak trees grown tall and strong. And there on the porch, 2 figures in rocking chairs. Wade Sullivan at 71, still tall, still strong, though his hair is white now and his face is lined with years of sun and weather. Josephine at 62, gray-haired and soft around the edges, but with those same sharp eyes that saw through Edwin Porter's lies and Miranda's cruelty and Wade's awkward proposal to the truth underneath it all. They wave as we pass. I wave back. "That's them?" one of my passengers asks. A young woman, maybe 25, traveling west to start fresh after some disappointment back east. I've heard her story before. Different details, same heartbreak. "That's them," I confirm. "And they really met the way you said? He really proposed on the spot?" "Yes, ma'am. I was there. Saw the whole thing." "And she really stood up in church and announced she'd marry him before he even knew?" "She did indeed." The young woman is quiet, watching the ranch disappear behind us as we continue down the road. "Do you think—" she starts, then stops, starts again. "Do you think that could happen for anyone? Finding something good after something terrible?" I think about all the years, all the miles, all the stories I've carried across this territory. I think, I say slowly, that terrible things happen all the time. Betrayals, disappointments, plans that fall apart. But I also think that if you're brave enough to keep going, if you're brave enough to take a risk on something unexpected, sometimes you find something better than what you lost. How do you know when to take the risk? You don't. That's what makes it a risk. I glance back at her in my mirror. But I'll tell you what I learned from watching Wade and Josephine. The risk isn't in choosing wrong. The risk is in being too scared to choose at all. She nods slowly, taking that in. We ride in silence for a while, the stage rocking gently, the Texas sun painting everything gold. Behind us, on that porch, Wade Sullivan reaches over and takes his wife's hand. She squeezes back. They don't need words anymore. After 20 years, they speak in touches and looks, and the comfortable silence of 2 people who chose each other and kept choosing each other every day since. That's what builds a legend, not the dramatic beginning, the quiet, faithful middle. The choosing to stay when staying gets hard, the partnership that weathers every storm. And somewhere in heaven, I like to think Wade's mother is smiling, because he kept his promise. He found someone real. He built a family. He made sure the Broken Spur didn't die lonely. And it all started because one desperate woman stepped off my stage on a hot summer day And one lonely rancher looked at her and saw not what she'd lost, but what they could build together. Then she's free to choose me. 5 words that changed 2 lives. 5 words that became a legend. 5 words I'll carry with me until my last ride. Because I was there. I saw it happen. And it was real.